Unpacking Ghana's controversial invitation to military rulers, a deep dive into Africa's political landscape. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where we engage with the most critical political issues affecting the African continent. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. In today's video, we'll be unpacking Ghana's controversial decision to invite military rulers from across West Africa to the inauguration of its democratically elected president. Is this a diplomatic move for regional cooperation or a sign of double standards? Let's dive deep into the political landscape of West Africa and explore the potential implications of this bold move. On January 7, 2025, Ghana's decision to invite military leaders from across West Africa to the inauguration of its democratically elected president, John Dramani Mahama, sparked significant debate. This move has been interpreted by some as a strategic effort to foster regional cooperation, while others view it as indicative of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, inconsistent approach to military governments. This video critically examines Ghana's invitation, compares it to similar events across the African continent, and explores its potential impact on the future of democracy in West Africa. Additionally, it analyzes the evolving role of ECOWAS in addressing military coups and the implications for regional stability. Ghana's invitation, a strategic move or a sign of double standards. Ghana's decision to invite military leaders to President Mahama's inauguration was met with mixed reactions. International relations expert Dr. Vladimir Antwi-Danso dismissed concerns over the presence of Burkina Faso's military leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, at the ceremony, labeling the criticisms as meaningless. This perspective suggests that Ghana's invitation was a diplomatic gesture aimed at promoting regional unity, irrespective of the political systems of the invited leaders. However, this approach raises questions about ECOWAS's consistency in handling military governments. The bloc has previously imposed sanctions and suspended memberships of countries like Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso following military coups. The invitation to military leaders for a democratic inauguration could be perceived as a departure from ECOWAS's established stance, potentially undermining its credibility in promoting democratic governance. Comparative analysis. Similar events across Africa. Ghana's invitation mirrors instances in other African nations where military leaders have been included in democratic events. For example, in 2017, the Gambia's inauguration of President Adama Barrow was attended by military leaders from neighboring countries, including Guinea and Senegal. While this was largely seen as a regional show of support, it also highlighted the complexities of integrating military leaders into democratic processes. Similarly, in 2019, Sudan's transitional government invited military leaders to participate in the signing of a power-sharing agreement with civilian leaders. This inclusion was crucial for ensuring the military's commitment to the transition, but also sparked debates about the balance of power between military and civilian authorities. Impact on the future of democracy in West Africa. The inclusion of military leaders in democratic events can have both positive and negative implications for the future of democracy in West Africa. On one hand, it may facilitate dialogue and cooperation between military and civilian leaders, fostering a more inclusive political environment. On the other hand, it risks legitimizing military rule and potentially emboldening undemocratic elements within the region. The recent decision by ECOWAS to approve a transitional timeline for Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso to exit the bloc underscores the challenges in promoting democratic governance. These countries have expressed dissatisfaction with ECOWAS's handling of their political crises, leading to their withdrawal from the organization. This development highlights the need for ECOWAS to reassess its strategies in engaging with military-led governments to effectively support democratic transitions. The evolving role of ECOWAS in addressing military coups. ECOWAS has historically played a pivotal role in addressing military coups in West Africa, often through sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and at times, military intervention. However, the organization's recent challenges, including the departure of member states like Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, have prompted a re-evaluation of its approach. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, by these countries signifies a shift towards alternative alliances, potentially diminishing ECOWAS's influence in the region. To maintain its relevance and effectiveness, ECOWAS may need to adopt a more nuanced approach, balancing diplomatic engagement with military-led governments while upholding its commitment to democratic principles. This could involve fostering dialogue, supporting transitional processes, and ensuring that any engagement with military leaders aligns with the broader goal of restoring democratic governance. Implications for regional stability. The inclusion of military leaders in democratic events and the evolving dynamics within ECOWAS have significant implications for regional stability. While such inclusions can promote cooperation, they also risk undermining the commitment to democratic norms. The recent developments, including the AES's formation and the approval of exit timelines for coup-hit member states, indicate a period of transition and potential fragmentation within the region. How ECOWAS and other regional actors navigate these changes will be crucial in determining the future political landscape of West Africa. ECOWAS's strategic shift and future direction. The ongoing shifts in the political landscape of West Africa, particularly the increasing influence of military governments, present a new set of challenges for ECOWAS. As the bloc faces mounting pressure to address the crisis of military coups in countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the question remains, can ECOWAS effectively adapt to the changing dynamics while maintaining its credibility and commitment to democracy? ECOWAS's involvement in past crises, such as the 2000 intervention in Guinea-Bissau and the 2017 military coup in the Gambia, demonstrated the bloc's capacity for regional cooperation. However, the organization now faces a significant challenge as military leaders in the Sahel and West Africa appear increasingly resistant to external pressure and sanctions. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, which includes military leaders from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, signals an attempt to bypass ECOWAS's authority and pursue alternative regional partnerships, Reuters.com. In light of this, ECOWAS will need to reconsider its strategy, particularly its heavy reliance on sanctions and the threat of military intervention. While sanctions have played a key role in punishing military juntas, the success of such measures is debatable. For instance, the junta in Mali has shown resilience against ECOWAS's sanctions, and similar tactics may not yield the desired results in other countries experiencing coups. Furthermore, these sanctions are increasingly seen as counterproductive, contributing to economic hardship for ordinary citizens rather than curbing the ambitions of military leaders. appnews.com. Regional cooperation versus democracy, a delicate balance. The invitation to military leaders for Ghana's inauguration could be interpreted as a pragmatic approach in an attempt to re-establish regional cooperation. By engaging with military leaders, Ghana may have sought to keep the channels of diplomacy open, ensuring that the country remains an influential player in shaping the future of the region. Such cooperation could be essential in mitigating further instability and preventing escalation in countries that have already experienced political upheaval. Yet, this decision brings with it the risk of undermining Ghana's democratic principles. Ghana has long been regarded as a beacon of democracy in West Africa, with regular elections and peaceful transitions of power. By extending an olive branch to military rulers, Ghana may inadvertently encourage other leaders in the region to take similar paths toward power. This raised concerns that the region, long considered a model for democratic consolidation in Africa, could suffer setbacks, as other states might see military rule as a viable solution to political gridlock or conflict. Moreover, such invitations could send the wrong message to citizens in West Africa who continue to strive for democratic governance. It may lead to confusion as the lines between democracy and military rule become increasingly blurred. If regional organizations like ECOWAS show leniency towards military juntas, the continent risks slipping into a cycle of weak governance and instability. Lessons from Africa's democratic struggles across the African continent. Countries have faced significant struggles with democracy, where military leaders have periodically disrupted the democratic process. From Egypt's 2013 coup to the ongoing political instability in Zimbabwe, military rulers have often been seen as a quick fix to entrenched political and economic problems. However, the long-term consequences of military interventions have often been disastrous, resulting in repression, economic decline, and the erosion of democratic freedoms. The recent wave of military coups in West Africa, including those in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso, follows a similar pattern. These countries have been grappling with economic and political turmoil for years, and military juntas have positioned themselves as the solution to widespread dissatisfaction. Yet, as history has shown, such transitions rarely lead to lasting stability. Instead, they often give rise to new power struggles, deepening divisions within society and further undermining democratic institutions. Ghana's decision to invite military leaders could therefore be seen in the broader context of Africa's ongoing struggle with military interventions and democratic consolidation. While regional cooperation is crucial, it is equally important for African nations to uphold democratic values and principles. ECOWAS, as the preeminent regional body, must strive to maintain its commitment to democracy and human rights, ensuring that political transitions are led by civilian governments rather than military forces. The role of civil society and public opinion in shaping future policies. One of the most important factors in determining the future trajectory of West Africa's political landscape is the role of civil society. Public opinion in countries like Ghana, Mali, and Burkina Faso will be critical in shaping the direction of political transitions. In recent years, widespread protests and civil movements have shown that the African public is increasingly unwilling to tolerate autocratic rule. In countries like Mali, where anti-ECOWAS sentiment is growing, the military's legitimacy is fragile. While the military may have initially enjoyed popular support for removing former leaders, the ongoing struggles in governance, coupled with economic hardships, have led to increasing disillusionment with the junta. The same applies to Burkina Faso, where public support for the military has waned due to the lack of progress in resolving security challenges. In contrast, Ghana's peaceful democratic transitions over the years have proven the resilience of its political system. While inviting military leaders to the inauguration may have been a pragmatic move, the strength of Ghana's civil society, media, and public opinion can act as a counterbalance to any backslide into authoritarianism. Ghana's citizens will likely continue to demand transparency, accountability, and democratic reforms, keeping their country on a path of democratic consolidation. Looking ahead, the future of West Africa's democracy. As Ghana and ECOWAS navigate the delicate balance between regional cooperation and the promotion of democratic values, the future of West Africa's political landscape remains uncertain. The inclusion of military leaders in democratic events such as presidential inaugurations may continue to raise questions about the legitimacy of military regimes and the role of regional bodies like ECOWAS. As the situation unfolds, it will be critical for ECOWAS to adopt a more flexible, nuanced approach to handling military-led governments. This may involve shifting from punitive sanctions to more constructive forms of engagement, such as supporting transitional governments and facilitating dialogue between military and civilian leaders. Additionally, ECOWAS must prioritize the restoration of democratic governance and human rights, ensuring that any engagement with military leaders does not compromise the organization's commitment to democratic values. Ultimately, the future of democracy in West Africa will depend on the resilience of civil society, the role of regional bodies like ECOWAS, and the ability of governments to address the root causes of political instability without resorting to military rule. As Ghana's invitation to military leaders highlights, the path forward is fraught with challenges, but it also presents opportunities for regional cooperation, dialogue, and democratic renewal. The influence of international actors on West Africa's political stability. The role of international actors such as the United Nations, the African Union, AU, and external powers like France and the United States remains crucial in shaping the political dynamics of West Africa. Their influence can either support democratic processes or inadvertently contribute to the consolidation of military rule. The UN, through its Security Council, has often played an active role in addressing political instability in West Africa, providing peacekeeping forces and diplomatic interventions in conflict zones. However, its effectiveness in preventing military coups has been limited. For example, despite the UN's involvement in Mali and the Sahel region, the rise of military juntas has persisted. The UN's ability to influence West African military leaders depends heavily on its relationships with regional organizations like ECOWAS, as well as its credibility in promoting democratic values. The African Union, too, has faced criticism for its inconsistent stance on military governments. While the AU has condemned coups in the past, its ability to take decisive action has often been hindered by the politics of its member states. In the case of Sudan, for instance, the AU initially suspended the country after the 2019 coup, but later engaged with military leaders as part of a transitional power-sharing agreement. This inconsistency undermines the AU's credibility in promoting democratic transitions. External actors, particularly former colonial powers such as France, have historically exerted considerable influence in West Africa. France's military presence in Mali and its support for certain governments in the region have raised questions about neo-colonial influence and its alignment with democratic principles. The support or tacit approval of military governments by external actors can send a signal to the region's citizens that military rule is an acceptable alternative to democratic governance. The case for regional security and cooperation. Despite the setbacks in promoting democracy, the importance of regional security and cooperation cannot be overstated. West Africa faces significant security challenges, including terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS, which have destabilized large swaths of the region. In countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the inability of state forces to effectively counter these insurgencies has contributed to the rise of military governments, which promise greater security. While military juntas may be able to offer short-term stability in the face of these threats, the long-term solution lies in strengthening democratic governance and ensuring that civilian governments are equipped to address security challenges. ECOWAS, with its mandate for regional security and stability, should work to enhance the capacity of West African nations to combat terrorism and insurgency through joint military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and capacity-building initiatives. This would reduce the reliance on military coups as a solution to security concerns and, in turn, contribute to the restoration of civilian rule. Furthermore, the establishment of a common security framework within ECOWAS could help address the regional dynamics of insecurity while reinforcing the bloc's commitment to democracy. Such a framework would not only focus on counterterrorism efforts but also prioritize human rights and the rule of law, ensuring that military interventions are not used as a cover for the suppression of democratic freedoms. The role of the youth and social movements in shaping political change. Another key factor in determining the future political trajectory of West Africa is the involvement of youth and civil society movements. Over the past decade, youth-led movements have played a pivotal role in pushing for political reforms and demanding accountability from governments. In countries like Senegal, Ivory Coast, and even Nigeria, youth activism has been a force for political change, calling for greater transparency and better governance. The youth demographic in West Africa is growing rapidly, and their political engagement will be critical in shaping the region's future. With the rise of social media and digital platforms, young people in the region are now more connected than ever, providing them with a powerful tool to organize and mobilize for change. This new wave of activism could be the driving force behind a regional movement that rejects military rule and demands that governments adhere to democratic norms. As witnessed in countries like Sudan and Algeria, mass protests and civil disobedience have forced military leaders to reconsider their hold on power and engage in transitional processes. The recent EndSARS protests in Nigeria, which highlighted widespread youth dissatisfaction with government corruption and police brutality, demonstrated the potential for mass movements to challenge entrenched political systems. Similarly, youth movements in Mali and Burkina Faso have started to vocalize their opposition to military rule, demanding more democratic reforms and the restoration of civilian leadership. For these movements to succeed, however, they will need the support of regional and international partners. ECOWAS, as the leading regional organization, must ensure that the voices of young people and civil society are not sidelined in political transitions. By facilitating platforms for dialogue between youth leaders, government representatives, and civil society organizations, ECOWAS can help create a more inclusive political environment that reflects the aspirations of the people, navigating the path forward for West Africa. As Ghana's invitation to military rulers and the growing trend of military coups in West Africa show, the region stands at a crossroads. While military governments may offer temporary solutions to political and security challenges, they ultimately threaten the long-term stability and prosperity of the region. West African nations, with the support of ECOWAS and other regional actors, must focus on strengthening democratic institutions, improving governance, and tackling the root causes of political instability, such as poverty, corruption, and inadequate security. The future of democracy in West Africa will depend on the ability of ECOWAS to adapt to the changing political landscape while remaining steadfast in its commitment to democratic values. Ghana's approach of engaging military leaders may be seen as a pragmatic attempt to ensure regional cooperation, but it should not come at the cost of democratic principles. Ultimately, the path forward for West Africa lies in empowering its citizens, strengthening the rule of law, and fostering a political environment where military interventions are no longer seen as a solution. Through inclusive governance, regional security cooperation, and the active participation of civil society, West Africa can chart a course toward a more democratic, stable, and prosperous future. The next steps for ECOWAS and the rest of the continent will require careful negotiation, strategic foresight, and a renewed commitment to upholding the values that form the bedrock of democratic societies. As West Africa grapples with these complex political dynamics, the choices made today will shape the region's political future for generations to come. The role of ECOWAS in ensuring democratic transitions, a reflection on past failures and future prospects. As we look to the future of West Africa's political landscape, ECOWAS's role in ensuring peaceful and democratic transitions cannot be overstated. However, the recent developments in countries like Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso underscore the challenges the organization faces in maintaining its credibility and enforcing democratic governance across the region. The resurgence of military regimes has posed significant hurdles for ECOWAS, which has traditionally positioned itself as a defender of democracy and stability. While ECOWAS has responded to coups with sanctions and diplomatic efforts, the question remains, can it effectively lead the region towards a future where democracy is the norm rather than the exception? A key lesson from the past is the importance of consistency in ECOWAS's approach to military coups. Over the years, the bloc has imposed sanctions, suspended memberships, and threatened military intervention in response to coups. Yet these measures have often proven ineffective in reversing the tide of military rule. In countries like Mali, where military juntas have consistently resisted ECOWAS's efforts, the bloc's strategies seem to have lost their impact. This has led to frustration within the regional body and has left many questioning whether ECOWAS's current approach is still relevant. Considering this, ECOWAS must evolve its strategies to better address the changing political dynamics of the region. One potential approach could involve prioritizing diplomacy and dialogue over punitive measures. For instance, rather than immediately resorting to sanctions, ECOWAS could initiate diplomatic talks with military leaders and encourage them to engage in meaningful negotiations with civilian opposition groups. This strategy would help foster a more inclusive political environment, where all stakeholders, including military leaders, civilian opposition parties, and civil society groups, have a seat at the table. Additionally, ECOWAS could establish a more robust framework for supporting democratic transitions. This could involve providing financial and technical support to countries in transition, assisting with the drafting of new constitutions, and helping to build strong, independent institutions. By focusing on long-term governance reforms, ECOWAS would be better positioned to help countries avoid the pitfalls of military rule and build resilient democratic systems that can withstand political challenges. The growing influence of the military, causes and consequences. The rise of military leaders in West Africa is not a mere coincidence. It reflects deeper structural issues within the region's political systems. Over the past few decades, many West African countries have faced significant challenges in governance, including entrenched corruption, weak state institutions, and widespread inequality. In many cases, these systemic issues have eroded public trust in civilian governments, creating a fertile ground for military intervention. For instance, in Mali, the long-standing challenges of insecurity and poverty, coupled with a lack of effective governance, provided the backdrop for the 2021 military coup. Similarly, in Burkina Faso, escalating violence from jihadist groups and a perceived failure of the government to protect its citizens contributed to the military's rise to power. In both cases, the military framed itself as a solution to the failures of civilian leadership, positioning itself as the guarantor of security and stability. This phenomenon is not unique to West Africa. Across the continent, military coups have often been justified on the grounds of national security and the protection of citizens. The growing insecurity in regions like the Sahel has only amplified these justifications, as military leaders claim to be better equipped to address the security crisis. While these claims may resonate with citizens who are frustrated with weak civilian governments, the reality is that military rule seldom provides lasting solutions. In fact, military governments often exacerbate instability by undermining democratic processes, curtailing civil liberties, and concentrating power in the hands of a few individuals. The need for regional security cooperation. Lessons from the Sahel. The Sahel region, which includes countries like Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Chad, has become a focal point of security concerns in West Africa. The spread of extremist groups combined with weak state institutions and porous borders has created a perfect storm of insecurity. As military governments in these countries continue to consolidate power, regional security cooperation will be essential in addressing the root causes of instability. ECOWAS has an important role to play in facilitating regional security cooperation. The establishment of joint military operations and intelligence sharing agreements among West African countries could help counter the spread of terrorism and organized crime. However, this cooperation must be grounded in democratic governance principles. It is essential that ECOWAS works to ensure that any security partnerships are transparent, accountable, and aligned with the broader goal of supporting democratic rule. Moreover, ECOWAS should work to build the capacity of West African countries to address internal security challenges without resorting to military coups. This could involve providing training to security forces, enhancing border control mechanisms, and supporting national reconciliation processes. By focusing on the root causes of insecurity and strengthening civilian security structures, ECOWAS can help prevent the rise of military regimes and promote long-term stability. Engaging with the African Union and other continental bodies. While ECOWAS plays a central role in West Africa, it is important to recognize the broader context of Africa's political landscape. The African Union, AU, is another key regional body that must work in tandem with ECOWAS to address the challenges posed by military rule. The AU has consistently condemned military coups and sought to promote democratic governance across the continent. However, its ability to influence outcomes has been limited, particularly when it comes to countries with strong military leadership. A more coordinated approach between ECOWAS and the AU could strengthen efforts to address the rise of military rule in West Africa. By aligning their strategies, these organizations could present a unified front in support of democracy. This could include joint diplomatic missions, coordinated sanctions, and collective peacekeeping efforts. Furthermore, both ECOWAS and the AU should work to strengthen their mechanisms for preventing coups, focusing on early warning systems and proactive engagement with governments before crises escalate. The role of the international community toward a unified approach. The international community, including the United Nations, the European Union, and key international partners like the United States and France, also has a critical role to play in shaping the future of West Africa's democracy. While ECOWAS remains the primary regional actor, global powers can provide diplomatic, economic, and military support to bolster the efforts of regional organizations. the international community must adopt a unified approach to addressing military rule in West Africa. This means aligning efforts with ECOWAS and the AU to ensure that diplomatic pressure, sanctions, and peacekeeping efforts are coordinated and consistent. Furthermore, international actors should prioritize supporting democratic governance by aiding countries in transition, particularly those that are emerging from military rule. Building public trust, the key to long-term stability. Ultimately, the future of democracy in West Africa depends on the ability of governments to rebuild public trust and address the grievances that have fueled the rise of military rule. Citizens must believe that their governments are responsive, transparent, and capable of delivering basic services. This requires significant reforms to political systems, greater accountability, and a commitment to upholding human rights and the rule of law. Civil society organizations, the media, and political parties will be crucial in holding governments accountable and ensuring that democratic norms are upheld. These groups must work together to demand greater political participation, freedom of expression, and the protection of minority rights. As the region grapples with the complexities of military rule, ECOWAS, the AU, and the international community must remain committed to promoting democracy and stability in West Africa. Through cooperation, dialogue, and a focus on long-term governance reforms, the region can overcome its political challenges and build a more democratic future. The road ahead will be difficult, but the lessons learned from past failures and the resilience of West Africa's citizens offer hope for a brighter future. As military rule continues to challenge the region's political landscape, the question remains: will ECOWAS and its partners rise to the occasion and ensure that democracy prevails, or will the cycle of coups and instability continue to undermine the region's progress? The role of youth and civil society in shaping the future of West Africa. As the political landscape in West Africa continues to evolve, one of the most powerful forces in shaping the future of the region is its youth and civil society. The growing demographic of young people in West Africa, combined with increasing levels of education and access to information through social media, has created a new generation of political activists who are less inclined to accept military rule or undemocratic governance. This dynamic presents both an opportunity and a challenge for the region's political stability. In recent years, young people in countries like Nigeria, Senegal, and Mali have taken to the streets to protest against government corruption, human rights abuses, and the erosion of democratic freedoms. These movements, often fueled by social media and grassroots organizations, have played a pivotal role in calling attention to the deficiencies in governance and the need for political change. The role of youth-led activism in countries such as Sudan, Algeria, and even Burkina Faso underscores the potential for young people to challenge entrenched political systems and push for a more democratic future. As West Africa grapples with the rise of military leaders, it is essential that youth movements are incorporated into broader political dialogues and decision-making processes. ECOWAS and national governments must recognize the importance of engaging with young people and giving them a voice in shaping the future of their countries. By supporting youth initiatives and providing platforms for political engagement, West African nations can harness the energy and creativity of their young people to drive positive change and reinforce democratic values. Building inclusive political systems, a path to lasting stability. A critical lesson from the rise of military governments in West Africa is the need for more inclusive political systems. In many cases, the failure of civilian governments to address the needs and grievances of their populations has paved the way for military leaders to seize power. When citizens feel excluded from political processes, or when their voices are not heard, it creates an environment ripe for military intervention. For ECOWAS and other regional bodies, fostering inclusive governance will be key to preventing the further spread of military regimes. This includes ensuring that opposition groups, civil society organizations, and marginalized communities have a meaningful role in decision-making processes. Political systems must be reformed to reflect the diverse interests of society, ensuring that all citizens can participate in the political process. This can be achieved through reforms such as electoral reforms, decentralization of power, and the strengthening of political parties and civil society organizations. In addition to promoting inclusive governance, there is a need for political systems that are responsive to the challenges of the 21st century. This includes addressing issues like economic inequality, youth unemployment, and access to education and healthcare. By addressing these root causes of instability, governments can reduce the appeal of military coups and improve the resilience of democratic institutions. The importance of education in strengthening democracy. Education is one of the most powerful tools for strengthening democracy and preventing the rise of military rule. In many West African countries, the education system remains underfunded and inaccessible to large segments of the population, particularly in rural areas. This contributes to political apathy and disenfranchisement, creating an environment where military regimes can present themselves as the only viable solution to governance problems. By investing in education, governments can equip citizens with the knowledge and skills necessary to participate in the democratic process. Educated populations are more likely to demand transparency, accountability, and good governance from their leaders. In particular, the education of young people is crucial, as it is this demographic that will shape the future political landscape of West Africa. ECOWAS and other regional bodies must work to support educational initiatives across the region. This includes not only improving access to primary and secondary education, but also investing in higher education and vocational training. By prioritizing education, West Africa can create a more informed electorate that is less susceptible to the allure of military rule. The role of the media in promoting democracy and accountability. The media plays a vital role in promoting democracy, transparency, and accountability. In many West African countries, the media is increasingly under pressure, with journalists facing harassment, censorship, and violence for reporting on government corruption or military actions. However, despite these challenges, the media remains one of the most important pillars of democratic governance. Independent media outlets in West Africa have often played a key role in exposing government abuses, informing the public, and holding leaders accountable. The media also provides a platform for debate and discussion, allowing citizens to engage with the political process and voice their concerns. In countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Ghana, the media has been instrumental in promoting democratic reforms and facilitating peaceful transitions of power. For democracy to thrive in West Africa, it is essential that media freedom is protected and that journalists are allowed to report without fear of retribution. ECOWAS and national governments must work to create an environment where the media can operate freely and independently. This includes enacting laws that protect journalists, ensuring access to information, and combating disinformation and fake news. International support for democratic transitions, a coordinated approach. The international community must play an active role in supporting democratic transitions in West Africa. While ECOWAS remains the key regional actor, the support of global powers, including the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States, is critical for ensuring the success of democratic reforms. International partners can provide financial assistance, technical support, and diplomatic backing for countries transitioning from military rule to democracy. However, international support must be carefully calibrated to avoid reinforcing authoritarian regimes or undermining democratic transitions. For example, foreign aid and investments should be tied to concrete political reforms, such as the restoration of civilian rule, the strengthening of democratic institutions, and the protection of human rights. By supporting democratic transitions in a consistent and principled manner, international actors can help ensure that West Africa moves toward a more democratic and stable future. Navigating the complex path ahead. West Africa stands at a critical juncture. The rise of military rule, coupled with the challenges of governance, insecurity, and political instability, presents significant obstacles to the region's democratic aspirations. However, the resilience of civil society, the increasing engagement of youth, and the efforts of regional organizations like ECOWAS offer hope for the future. For West Africa to move beyond military rule and toward lasting democratic governance, it will require a collective effort from governments, regional organizations, civil society, and the international community. This includes strengthening democratic institutions, promoting inclusive governance, investing in education, and ensuring the protection of media freedom. By addressing the root causes of instability and building strong, resilient political systems, West Africa can pave the way for a more democratic, stable, and prosperous future. The road ahead will undoubtedly be challenging, but through cooperation, dialogue, and a steadfast commitment to democratic principles, West Africa has the potential to overcome its political and security challenges. The question remains, will the region seize this opportunity for transformation, or will the cycle of military coups and political instability continue to undermine its progress? The answers lie in the hands of the people, the leaders, and the institutions that shape the political landscape of West Africa. The challenge of regional unity amidst political fragmentation. As West Africa seeks to address its democratic deficits and stabilize its political environment, regional unity has become a critical factor in navigating the crisis of military rule. ECOWAS has historically been seen as a model for regional cooperation, bringing together diverse countries with varied political, social, and economic backgrounds. However, the challenges of military coups, insurgencies, and fragmented political systems have strained the unity of the organization, with some member states expressing frustration with ECOWAS's handling of military-led governments. The recent tensions between ECOWAS and countries like Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso, which have embraced military leadership after coups, highlight the growing divide within the bloc. These countries have increasingly distanced themselves from ECOWAS, with Burkina Faso and Mali leaving the organization and openly challenging its authority. This fragmentation could weaken ECOWAS's ability to effectively address the political crises in the region, potentially leading to a situation where different groups within West Africa operate in isolation, undermining collective efforts to promote peace and democracy. The unity of ECOWAS is critical in addressing cross-border issues such as terrorism, organized crime, and migration. However, if countries continue to break away from the bloc or adopt different regional alliances, it could further fragment the political and security landscape of West Africa, making it more difficult for the region to present a unified front against threats to stability. For ECOWAS to remain a strong and effective force for democracy, it will need to find ways to reconcile its differences with military-led governments and encourage more inclusive dialogue between member states. The long-term solution: strengthening democratic institutions from the ground up. While regional cooperation and diplomatic engagement are crucial, the long-term solution to West Africa's political instability lies in strengthening democratic institutions at the national level. Without strong institutions, the democratic process becomes vulnerable to disruption by political elites, military leaders, and external forces. The resilience of democratic governance is tested when institutions such as the judiciary, electoral commissions, political parties, and civil society organizations are weak or lack independence. One of the key areas where West African countries must focus their efforts is electoral reform. Many military coups in the region have been justified on the premise of electoral fraud or undemocratic practices by civilian governments. Strengthening electoral systems and ensuring free, fair, and transparent elections can significantly reduce the chances of military intervention. This includes investing in voter education, ensuring the independence of electoral commissions, and addressing systemic barriers that prevent marginalized groups from participating in the political process. Equally important is the strengthening of the judiciary, which is essential for holding leaders accountable and ensuring that the rule of law is upheld. In many West African countries, the judiciary has been undermined by political interference, corruption, and a lack of resources. Judicial reforms are needed to ensure that the judiciary can function independently and impartially, providing a check on executive power and protecting the rights of citizens. Additionally, political parties must be strengthened to provide citizens with genuine alternatives to military-led rule. In many cases, the lack of political party development and the concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals have created an environment where the military is seen as the only viable alternative to civilian governments. Strengthening political parties, encouraging ideological diversity, and fostering competitive elections are essential steps in ensuring that democracy is more than just a formality. The role of the African Union in supporting ECOWAS. While ECOWAS remains the primary regional organization tasked with addressing political instability and promoting democracy in West Africa, the African Union, AU, has an important role to play in supporting these efforts. The AU has long been committed to the promotion of democratic governance across the continent, and its role in addressing military coups and undemocratic regimes is crucial for achieving lasting peace and stability. The AU's approach to military rule has been varied, but it has taken a stronger stance in recent years against coups. For instance, in the aftermath of the 2021 coup in Guinea, the AU suspended the country's membership and called for the restoration of constitutional order. However, the AU has faced challenges in implementing its decisions, particularly in cases where military governments have defied its resolutions. This highlights the need for greater coordination between the AU and ECOWAS to ensure that both organizations work in tandem to address the challenges of military rule. Moving forward, the AU can play a more proactive role in supporting ECOWAS's efforts to address the root causes of political instability in West Africa. This could include providing technical assistance, sharing best practices, and supporting the training of political leaders and civil society organizations. By working together, the AU and ECOWAS can enhance their collective impact and create a more robust framework for promoting democracy in the region. The international community's role in supporting democratic transitions. The international community, including multilateral institutions like the United Nations, the European Union, and bilateral partners such as the United States and France, plays a pivotal role in supporting democratic transitions in West Africa. While ECOWAS remains the primary regional actor, the global community's support can help reinforce efforts to restore civilian rule and promote democratic governance. International support must be focused on long-term capacity building rather than short-term fixes. This means prioritizing assistance for the development of democratic institutions, strengthening civil society, and supporting the rule of law. Rather than simply imposing sanctions, the international community must be prepared to offer incentives for governments that engage in genuine democratic reforms. For example, the EU has long been a partner in the promotion of democracy in West Africa, providing financial and technical assistance to electoral commissions, civil society organizations, and political parties. The United States, through programs such as the USAID Democracy and Governance Initiative, has supported democratic transitions in countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone. Moving forward, the international community must ensure that its support is aligned with the broader goals of fostering sustainable, inclusive, and accountable governance. Moreover, the international community must hold military regimes accountable for their actions and ensure that their decisions are not rewarded with diplomatic legitimacy. For instance, Western powers should carefully consider their engagement with military governments, especially in countries where democratic progress has been reversed. Supporting democratic transitions requires consistency in policy and a commitment to human rights and democracy. Strengthening the role of civil society and the private sector. While the role of governments, regional organizations, and the international community is critical, civil society and the private sector must also play a central role in shaping the future of democracy in West Africa. Civil society organizations, including non-governmental organizations, NGOs, media outlets, and grassroots movements, have long been at the forefront of advocating for democratic reforms and holding governments accountable. In countries like Senegal and Ghana, civil society has been instrumental in pushing for greater political accountability and transparency. These organizations provide vital checks on government power and offer platforms for citizens to voice their concerns. However, civil society groups often face significant challenges, including restrictions on freedom of expression, harassment, and limited access to resources. Strengthening civil society and ensuring its independence is essential for the success of democratic transitions. The private sector, particularly businesses and entrepreneurs, also plays a key role in fostering stability and economic development. By promoting job creation, supporting local communities, and investing in sectors such as education and healthcare, the private sector can help address some of the root causes of political instability, such as poverty and unemployment. In turn, this can reduce the appeal of military rule and create a more favorable environment for democratic governance. A collaborative effort for democracy and stability. As West Africa faces the challenges of military rule, democratic decline, and regional fragmentation, the path forward will require a collective and sustained effort from all stakeholders. ECOWAS, the AU, the international community, civil society, and the private sector must work together to promote democratic governance, strengthen institutions, and address the root causes of instability. While the road to lasting peace and democracy will be difficult, West Africa's history of resilience and commitment to democratic ideals provides hope for the future. The decisions made in the coming years will determine whether the region can overcome its political challenges or whether military rule and instability will continue to dominate its political landscape. Through dialogue, cooperation, and a shared commitment to democratic values, West Africa has the potential to build a brighter, more democratic future for generations to come. The path forward, embracing regional cooperation and institutional reform. As West Africa grapples with its political challenges, it is evident that the future of the region lies in the hands of its leaders, citizens, and regional bodies. The ongoing crisis of military coups, coupled with the erosion of democratic governance, calls for urgent action from all sectors of society. The solution does not rest solely with military leaders, nor can it be achieved through top-down directives alone. Instead, the future of democracy in West Africa will require an inclusive and collaborative effort that integrates all stakeholders, governments, civil society, the private sector, and the international community. For ECOWAS to be effective in its mission, it must adapt to the changing realities of West Africa's political landscape. While sanctions and diplomatic pressure have been central to its response to military coups, the organization should increasingly focus on building bridges rather than barriers. ECOWAS should prioritize dialogue, offer technical and financial support to countries in transition, and work towards sustainable political solutions that address the underlying causes of instability. Fostering a more inclusive regional order will ensure that ECOWAS remains relevant as a force for democracy and peace. At the national level, strengthening democratic institutions is paramount. This involves electoral reform, judicial independence, and the empowerment of civil society to hold governments accountable. Political parties should be nurtured to ensure they provide genuine alternatives to military rule. Additionally, investing in education, economic development, and the rule of law will help create societies where democracy thrives and citizens can hold their leaders to account. Advice to African leaders. To African leaders, the path to sustainable peace and prosperity lies in prioritizing democracy, governance, and the welfare of their citizens. Military coups may offer a short-term solution to perceived political deadlock, but they do not provide lasting stability. Leaders must recognize that the most sustainable form of governance is one that is accountable to the people, transparent, and responsive to their needs. African leaders should engage in political reforms that foster inclusivity, empower the youth, protect media freedoms, and build resilient institutions. The military must remain in its barracks, and any attempts to undermine democracy should be swiftly opposed by citizens, the international community, and regional bodies like ECOWAS. Leaders should also avoid the temptation to manipulate constitutions or suppress opposition, as such actions only erode public trust and destabilize the region. Furthermore, leaders must invest in education and economic development, creating opportunities for the youth who represent the future of the continent. By creating a system where opportunities are available for all, leaders can reduce the likelihood of social unrest and prevent the rise of undemocratic forces. Summary of key messages. 1. The importance of dialogue and regional cooperation. West Africa needs greater cooperation among its nations, especially through ECOWAS, to address political instability. Dialogue and mutual support are key to resolving conflicts and promoting democratic transitions. 2. Strengthening democratic institutions. Building strong democratic institutions, such as independent electoral commissions, a free press, and a robust judiciary, is essential for ensuring the long-term success of democracy in the region. 3. Engagement of civil society and youth. Civil society organizations, media, and the youth must play an active role in demanding better governance, transparency, and accountability from their leaders. 4. Investing in education and economic development. Sustainable peace and democracy can only be achieved through addressing the root causes of instability, including economic inequality and lack of access to education. Leaders must invest in their people and ensure that all citizens have opportunities for growth and prosperity. 5. International support for democratic transitions. The international community, including the United Nations, the African Union, and bilateral partners, must work together with ECOWAS to support democratic reforms in West Africa and hold military regimes accountable. 6. The need for political reforms. Political systems across West Africa must be reformed to ensure inclusivity, respect for human rights, and the protection of democratic norms. Governments must be responsive to the people and prioritize their welfare over personal or political power. In conclusion, West Africa stands at a crossroads. The choices made today will shape the future of the region for generations to come. While the challenges are immense, they are not insurmountable. Through cooperation, leadership, and a commitment to democratic values, West Africa can overcome its current crises and build a more stable, prosperous, and democratic future. The responsibility rests not only on regional organizations and international actors, but also on the leaders and citizens of West Africa to forge a path toward lasting peace and democratic governance. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to stay informed about the latest in African politics, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts on Ghana's invitation to military rulers and how you think it will affect democracy in West Africa. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. Together, we're shaping the future of African governance, one conversation at a time.